artificial, system online.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Our show is built on one core premise, and it's this. The AI revolution isn't coming. It's already here.
Exactly.
If you've been following our curriculum, Surviving AI, we've spent this entire first season really getting into the weeds, right. Understanding the algorithms, assessing your risk.
It all culminated in our last deep dive, the immunity test.
Right, where we gave you the tools to calculate your personal automation score.
And through all of that, we established a very clear, very urgent timeline. We're looking at a peak disruption window somewhere between 2027 and 2030. But this isn't Siri. The data shows, it shows 76,440 jobs were already lost to AI in 2025 alone.
That trajectory is it's so sharp. And it's understandably led a lot of you, our listeners, to ask a really crucial, really foundational question.
It's a great question.
It is. We've been so focused on the software, right? The models, the code, this kind of abstract digital world that and I'll admit it, we completely neglected the physical reality that powers it all.
The nuts and bolts.
The nuts and bolts. One listener posed a simple but really fundamental challenge. Can the physical world actually sustain this accelerating pace? Are the massive resource demands, we're talking energy, water, even political capital, are they going to create a bottleneck that slows things down?
Or shifts the timeline.
Or shifts that 2027 to 2030 employment disruption timeline we've been talking so much about.
So this deep dive it's our mandatory reality check. We've been analyzing a mountain of sources, all detailing the infrastructure needed to support this boom.
It's a huge topic.
It is.
Yeah.
Because if AI is the future of work, then the data center, that physical, power-hungry building full of servers, that's the present. We have to check if the engine of disruption is, running out of fuel.
Or maybe running out of resources to make the fuel.
That's a better way to put it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. I think we have to start with the infrastructure itself. We need to define what a data center even is in this new AI era. Because, these buildings have been around forever.
Since 1945, in some basic form.
Exactly. But the scale we're seeing now is it's fundamentally different.
It's a whole different animal. Historically, a data center was really just a building, maybe a secure room, that housed servers and network gear for, hosting a website, storing company emails.
The server room in the basement.
Basically. The explosion we're seeing now is driven by the continuous computation that AI requires, especially training and running these large language models. The result is a shift to what the industry calls hyperscale centers.
And what defines a hyperscale center? Is it just a bigger building, or is there something different going on inside?
It's both. A hyperscale center is designed from the ground up for maximum performance, massive storage, and the incredible power density you need to run tens of thousands of specialized AI chips.
So these are the ones that companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are building.
Right. And those three companies alone own over half the world's hyperscale inventory. And visually, what this translates to are these massive, windowless, fortress-like structures you see popping up in rural areas.
When you say massive, let's make that real for everyone listening. What kind of land footprint are we actually talking about here?
Well, the average AI-focused hyperscale center is around 30,000 square feet.
Yeah.
But the newest facilities, the ones being built right now, can exceed 1 million square feet.
1 million square feet.
1 million. To help you visualize that, that's like taking more than 17 regulation-sized football fields and putting them under one roof.
Wow.
All dedicated to processing data, managing heat, and consuming just enormous amounts of resources.
17 football fields. And those facilities, they are the foundation. They're the speed limit on this whole AI revolution we need to analyze.
That's the core of it.
All right, let's turn that engine on and look at its staggering resource appetite. This is what we're calling the AI energy tsunami. And I think we have to start with the shock stats because they really set the stage.
They do.
We've all heard the comparisons, but they're so crucial. A single conversational search with ChatGPT uses 10 times more electricity than a standard Google search. 10 times. And that's just at the individual interaction level. Now you have to scale that up to the facility level.
Right.
A typical modern AI data center consumes as much electricity as 100,000 households.
Wow.
It's because running generative AI models is just fundamentally more compute intensive than almost any other digital task we've ever created. And the largest facilities being developed right now, they're projected to consume 20 times that amount.
20 times the power of a center that already consumes the equivalent of 100,000 homes. That's an exponential curve. Our existing infrastructure just wasn't built for that.
Not even close.
So let's put this into a national context. How much power are we actually talking about in the U.S. right now, today?
In 2024, U.S. data centers, all of them combined, consumed about 183 terawatt hours of electricity.
And what does that mean in terms of the total U.S. consumption? That's already over 4% of America's total consumption. And to give you a real-world comparison that makes that scale tangible, that one industry, just data centers, consumes roughly the same annual electricity as the entire nation of Pakistan.
The whole country of Pakistan.
A country of 240 million people.
A nation of 240 million people. Powered by the U.S. data center industry. I think that's the benchmark we need to be using. And that's just the current state of things. This is accelerating, right?
Massively. The complexity of these AI models is the driver. Treating something like GPT-4 required over 51,000 megawatt hours. So by 2030, U.S. data center consumption is projected to grow by 133%.
133% in 6 years.
Up to 426 terawatt hours. Bloomberg NEF, which tracks this stuff religiously, they project demand could reach 106 gigawatts by 2035, and that's 36% higher than their own previous, already aggressive forecast.
So even the experts keep having to revise their numbers upwards because the demand is just outpacing everything.
Every prior technological forecast, yes.
Okay, so this is where it gets critical. We have to talk about the grid crisis. If demand is growing that fast, it must be destabilizing the electrical infrastructure that we all rely on.
It is already destabilizing it. And the evidence is, well, it's stark. Let's look at PJM Interconnection.
Remind us who they are.
They're the biggest grid operator in the U.S. They're responsible for keeping the lights on for about 65 million people across 13 states. Think Midwest down to the East Coast.
Okay.
For the first time in their history, PJM recently failed to secure enough power commitments to meet its mandatory reliability goal.
Wait, they failed their own primary job. What does a reliability goal failure actually mean for someone living in, say, Ohio or Pennsylvania?
It means that margin of safety.
Yeah.
That buffer that's required to prevent a catastrophic failure during a heat wave or a polar vortex. It's gone. It has evaporated.
And do they know why?
Oh, they know exactly why. The independent market monitor that oversees PJM explicitly stated that data center load growth is the, and I'm quoting, primary reason for these precarious conditions. It's not just an economic strain anymore. It's a threat to physical stability.
So we're talking about real potential blackouts, cascading failures. This isn't just a projection.
You have a chilling near miss that proves it. Northern Virginia, it's often called Data Center Alley, in the summer of 2024.
What happened?
60 data centers, which represent this enormous instantaneous load on the grid, they all suddenly disconnected.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And this triggered a massive, unexpected power surge that nearly caused cascading blackouts across the entire region. A former advisor to FERC, that's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, warned that the behavior of these data centers now has the potential to cause systemic outages for an entire region.
That is the definition of a fragile system. A few dozen buildings go offline, and they almost take the entire power network down with them. Okay, let's talk about the geographic hotspots. Because this problem isn't evenly distributed, is it? It's highly concentrated.
It is. Northern Virginia's ground zero. Data centers there accounted for 26% of the state's total electricity supply in 2023. And these aren't isolated compounds out in the desert. They're built right in residential areas, near schools, near retirement communities.
So the energy demand in this one small area is now the equivalent of running a small, densely populated industrial nation.
You could say that, yes. And then you have Texas. The grid there, ERCOT, has already proven how vulnerable it is to extreme weather. We all remember Winter Storm Uri.
Of course.
Well, Texas is a massive concern. In just 1 year, ERCOT received connection requests for 220 gigawatts of new data center projects.
220 gigawatts.
It's a staggering 170% increase. Now, not all of those will get built, but the sheer volume of speculative demand is overwhelming the system.
And what are the regulators saying about this? The people whose job it is to keep the grid stable.
The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, they're issuing some very stark warnings. They've calculated that if Texas gets another extreme winter event like Uri, this new demand could create a supply deficit of 15 gigawatts.
And a deficit means?
Rolling blackouts. The warning is unambiguous. They're saying power shortfalls and rolling outages could happen in the next few years in certain U.S. regions if this demand outstrips supply. and Texas is right at the top of that list.
So we've established the grid strain.
Yeah.
But this infrastructure, it costs a fortune. So let's connect this back to the listener's wallet. Who pays for all these necessary transmission upgrades? It's not the trillion-dollar tech companies, is it?
No. It's the local residents and businesses. They subsidize this boon through rate increases. Data centers require these massive multi-billion-dollar transmission upgrades, new lines, new substations, just to handle their continuous load.
And we have data on this.
We do. An analysis found that homes and businesses in just 7 states within that PJM market face $4.3 billion in additional costs from transmission projects needed just for data centers in 2024 alone.
$4.3 billion. So if I'm a resident in that PJM region, how does that translate into my monthly power bill?
Very directly. Data centers are responsible for inflating what's called the capacity market by an estimated $9.3 billion in PJM alone for the 2025-2026 period.
And that cost just gets passed on?
It's distributed across all the ratepayers. This translates directly to an expected rise of about $18 a month in Western Maryland and $16 a month in Ohio for an average residential bill.
$18 a month? That might not sound like a lot to a tech executive, but for a family trying to budget for groceries and gas, that is a real political problem. It's like a hidden tax.
It's an effective economic displacement event. And the projections for the future are even more severe. Dominion Energy, the big utility in that Northern Virginia hotspot, projects that residential electric bills in Virginia could more than double by 2039.
Double.
More than double. And they state that data center growth is the primary reason.
Wow. So if you happen to live in one of these high-demand areas, the AI boom could increase your cost of living by over 25% just for electricity.
That's based on a projection from Carnegie Mellon. A study they did estimated data centers could lead to an 8% average increase in U.S. electricity bills by 2030, but that it could easily exceed 25% in hyper-demand areas like Northern Virginia.
It raises a critical question for anyone listening and planning their future. Are you prepared for a world where you pay significantly more for basic electricity just to power your lights and your heat to fuel someone else's data engine?
That cost becomes a critical, accelerating constraint on how fast this stuff can actually be deployed.
That's a perfect transition point. Energy is only one side of this coin. Let's move from the electricity tsunami to water scarcity and cooling conflicts. Because if the grid is on fire with demand, there's one thing you need to stop a 1 million square foot building from literally melting down.
Water.
A lot of water.
A lot of water. And this issue is complex because water consumption is often hidden. It's not metered and reported in the same way energy is. But the same kind of shock stat applies here.
Go on.
A single short conversation with a generative AI like ChatGPT consumes an amount of water comparable to a standard plastic water bottle, about 519 milliliters for every 100-word prompt.
That's incredible. It immediately connects the abstract digital output, the chatbot reply, to a tangible resource cost. So what's the scale of consumption when we talk about the entire facility?
The scale is astronomical, and it's growing exponentially. In 2023, U.S. data centers directly consumed 17 billion gallons of water.
17 billion.
And that figure is now projected to double, maybe even quadruple, by 2028. A large hyperscale center can consume up to 5 million gallons a day.
5 million gallons of water a day.
Per day. That's equivalent to the annual water usage of a town of 10 to 50,000 people. We're talking about a major metropolitan-level thirst being applied to a single industrial campus.
What drives this incredible consumption? Is it just the scale, or is there a specific technological trade-off happening?
It's the laws of physics and an economic trade-off. These data centers are basically giant radiators. They generate immense heat that requires continuous cooling. And water, specifically through what are called evaporative cooling systems, is remarkably efficient and cheap for dissipating that heat.
But there's a catch.
There's a big catch. This creates the cooling paradox. Roughly 80% of this water, which is typically fresh water pulled from local sources, evaporates into the atmosphere. It's just gone. It becomes unavailable for reuse anywhere near the source.
So the operators are forced into this difficult choice. Either use more water for cheap, efficient cooling, which stresses local aquifers, or use less water but consume significantly more electricity for other cooling systems.
Exactly, like dry or closed-loop systems.
Right.
And that increases greenhouse gas emissions and drives up those utility bills we just talked about.
So they're trading one scarce resource for another.
And they often prioritize the cheaper method, which is water, to keep their operating costs low and meet their efficiency targets. The environmental cost of the locality is, well, It's not their primary concern.
Which brings us to a major conflict point, the location problem.
Precisely.
These centers are often built where land is cheap and power is accessible, but those aren't necessarily places with abundant water, are they?
No. In fact, we found that 20% of data centers in the U.S. were located in areas already experiencing significant water stress back in 2021. And this clustering is getting worse in drought-prone regions like Dallas, Phoenix, Reno.
Thirsty crops in the desert.
A hydrologist actually described them as thirsty crops. They're permanent structures that demand continuous watering, and they offer no flexibility during a drought when local resources are already at their breaking point.
So let's look at the specific community conflicts. This isn't a theoretical competition for resources anymore. This is a real fight.
The pushback is immediate, and it's severe in these arid regions. Take Arizona. The Tucson City Council voted unanimously to oppose Amazon's $3.6 billion Project Blue data center.
And why?
Residents were extremely concerned about water use in what is the nation's driest state. The project would have required buying water from the city utility, and it would have immediately become the utility's single largest consumer.
So the local government, the city council, actually stepped in and used its regulatory power to protect the local water supply.
It was a direct political victory for local citizens against a tech giant. And we're seeing similar strains elsewhere, even in places that seem wetter. In Oregon, a rural town called Boardman, population under 4,000.
Okay.
It's now home to over 30 data centers that have been built since 2011. And this continuous demand is severely straining the town's water supply and raising concerns about thermal pollution from the wastewater they discharge.
And then there's the truly chilling example, where water use could actually mobilize toxic materials. This turns a consumption problem into a public health catastrophe.
This is the critical, often hidden risk factor. It's happening in Memphis, Tennessee, around the XAI data center.
What's the situation there?
This massive facility is expected to use over 5 million gallons of water a day for cooling. Local community members and researchers are afraid that the increased pumping required will draw arsenic from nearby unlined coal ash ponds down into the drinking water aquifer.
So you're saying the digital boom could directly lead to poisoning the water supply with legacy industrial waste?
That's the fear. It connects the AI boom directly to a catastrophic public health risk. The competition for water is no longer just with agriculture or your neighbor watering their lawn. It's becoming a literal competition for clean, safe drinking water.
And that kind of existential threat that fuels the next major constraint we need to talk about, political opposition.
Exactly.
The moment you start talking about doubling electricity bills and drawing arsenic into the water supply, you are firmly in not in my backyard or NMBY territory. This leads us to our third major constraint, the grassroots revolt and the political bottleneck.
And this public opposition is proving to be a highly effective governor on the speed of AI deployment.
More effective than people might think.
Oh, absolutely. This opposition is highly organized, it's surprisingly coordinated across different states, and critically, it's financially consequential. It is creating real, immediate delays in deployment timelines that are bigger than any supply chain issue.
Okay, give us the numbers on the scale and success rate of this opposition.
We're currently tracking 142 activist groups operating across 24 states. Their sole purpose is organizing against data center developments.
How are they doing?
Their success rate is astonishing. These groups have successfully blocked or delayed 2 out of every 3 projects they've protested.
2 out of 3. That's a success rate any political movement would kill for. What's the overall economic impact of this constraint on the industry?
The industry is feeling it directly. As of mid-2025, $98 billion in data center projects have been blocked or delayed specifically because of community opposition.
$98 billion.
And the intensity is accelerating. The total value of projects blocked in just a recent 3-month stretch was actually higher than the total value of blockages in the prior 2 years combined.
So this is not a flash in the pan. This is a sustained, intensifying headwind for the entire infrastructure build-out.
It's a major structural impediment.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is how unpopular these data centers are, these clean white tech boxes. People hate them.
How do they compare to other, less desirable industrial facilities?
A nationwide poll found only 44% of Americans would welcome a data center nearby. To give you some context, that makes them less popular than wind farms, less popular than gas plants, even less popular than nuclear facilities.
Less popular than a nuclear power plant. Wow.
The opposition is driven by this toxic cocktail of noise pollution, the aesthetic blight, the grid strain that leads to higher bills, and the water consumption. It's becoming a bipartisan issue that local politicians are actually starting to capitalize on.
We saw that in Virginia, didn't we? In some local elections where campaigning against unchecked data center growth was a winning issue.
It was. It tells you the issue is deeply personal and political. And we're seeing these community victories play out beyond Tucson.
What are some other examples?
We're seeing local governments get creative. In Franklin Township, Indiana, Google entirely pulled its data center proposal after intense resident opposition. They had this whole campaign with yard signs, packed town halls. They successfully opposed the rezoning needed for the build.
And what about closer to Data Center Alley in the Mid-Atlantic?
In Prince George's County, Maryland, officials just put an immediate pause on all new data center development. They want time to study the community and environmental impacts.
And what prompted that?
A proposal to convert an abandoned mall into a data center. It sparked a petition against it that got 20,000 signatures.
20,000?
And in Texas, lawmakers introduced a kill switch mechanism, Senate Bill 6, which would let the state remotely disconnect data centers during a grid emergency. That's a direct acknowledgement that the state sees these facilities as a potential liability in a crisis.
But the core of the opposition, what really gives it the moral and legal weight, is the environmental justice and public health angle. This is that hidden, unpaid toll of the AI boom, and it often hits the most vulnerable communities first.
And the data here is alarming. Data centers contribute to air pollution in some really significant ways. They rely heavily on these massive diesel backup generators.
For when the power goes out.
Right. And even when they're just being tested, they emit substantial air pollutants like nitrogen dioxide and fine particulate matter.
Yeah.
And second, they often draw their enormous baseline power from existing fossil fuel plants, coal and natural gas.
So this isn't just about carbon emissions, which can feel abstract. This is about immediate, local, breath-level air quality.
Exactly. And researchers have actually quantified the health burden. A 2024 study estimates that the public health burden of U.S. data centers in 2030 will be valued at more than $20 billion a year.
$20 billion. How does that compare to other sources of pollution?
To give you perspective, that cost exceeds the projected health costs of all on-road vehicle emissions in the entire state of California. The study projected that the pollutants could cause around 600,000 asthma symptom cases and 1,300 premature deaths annually.
And critically, this burden isn't shared equally, is it?
No, it's a clear environmental justice issue. The study found that low-income counties could experience per-household health burdens equivalent to nearly 8 months of electricity bills.
8 months?
And more than 200 times that of wealthier counties. The industry is effectively externalizing its pollution costs onto the people who have the least political power to fight back.
We have a perfect and tragic example of this happening right now with that XAI data center in Memphis.
It's the textbook case. The XAI facility was deliberately sited in a historically black community, an area that is already overburdened with 17 other toxic industrial facilities.
And it runs on gas turbines and diesel backups.
It does. And researchers found that nitrogen dioxide levels increased by 79% in the areas immediately surrounding the data center after it started operations.
What was the community's response?
Swift and necessary. The NAACP filed a notice of intent to sue under the Clean Air Act. This pattern citing highly polluting, essential infrastructure in low-income communities and communities of color. It shows that the AI infrastructure boom is becoming the latest chapter in environmental racism, and that is generating powerful and effective political resistance.
Okay, so we have major accelerating constraints on power, on water, and on political acceptance. So now let's shift focus globally to our next bottleneck: global regulatory scrutiny and supply chain friction. It really seems like the environmental and political problems we just discussed are inevitably leading to mandatory compliance. It's becoming the new, unavoidable cost of doing business.
Regulation is catching up very quickly because the scale of consumption is no longer deniable. And Europe is really setting the immediate blueprint for the rest of the world. It's happening through 2 major directives that impose both transparency and liability.
Okay, tell us about the Transparency Directive first.
That's the EU Energy Efficiency Directive, or ED. It now requires any data center using 500 kilowatts or more to report its total energy consumption, its water usage, its renewable energy use, and its waste heat output every single year.
And where does that data go?
It's all fed into a public European database.
That requirement for public transparency is enormous. I mean, data center operators have traditionally treated this information as proprietary, almost a trade secret.
It forces a transparency that will inevitably lead to public pressure and then subsequent regulation all over the world. Experts like Dietrich from the Uptime Institute suggest the U.S. will likely have to follow suit once Europe publishes this data and the sheer scale of the consumption is globally visible.
Okay, and what's the second directive? The one about liability.
That's the EU Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA. And DORA fundamentally changes who is liable when something goes wrong.
How so?
It mandates that financial institutions have to ensure their third-party data center providers meet these incredibly strict resilience standards. Things like uptime guarantees, disaster recovery protocols, vulnerability scans.
And if the provider fails?
If the provider fails to meet those standards, the financial institution, the client, could be held liable. It effectively forces clients to only rent space in the most robust, compliant, and therefore more expensive facilities.
That completely shifts the financial risk of a physical failure from the building owner to the client. And that has to increase the cost and complexity of deployment across the board.
It does.
Are there any specific national regulations in Europe we should highlight that show this trend toward mandatory sustainability?
Germany's way ahead of the curve. They mandated that data centers have to cover 50% of their energy needs with renewables as of January 2024. And that rises to a full 100% by January 2027.
100% renewable by 2027.
Yes. We're also seeing the UK designate data centers as critical national infrastructure, which bolsters security but adds layers and layers of compliance and cost. These global compliance requirements are accelerating. The days of cheap, unregulated power consumption are rapidly ending.
So let's talk about the irony here. The corporate climate goals of these big tech companies are failing because of the very technology many of them claim will help solve climate change.
It's the central philosophical challenge. The scale of AI is actively undermining established climate commitments. Just look at Amazon. Their emissions rose from about 64 million metric tons in 2023 to over 68 million in 2024.
And that was their first emissions increase in years, right?
Yeah, their first since 2021. And they directly attribute it primarily to data center growth.
And Google, which has always been held up as a pioneer in the space, they're struggling with this tension too.
They are. Google's 2023 greenhouse gas emissions marked a 48% increase since 2019. Again, mostly due to the aggressive data center build-out needed for AI.
So what are the experts concluding?
Researchers at Cornell concluded that the cumulative effect of AI growth would put the entire tech industry's stated net zero emissions targets out of reach. Google themselves admitted in their 2025 environmental report that meeting their 2030 net zero goal has become, and I quote, very difficult.
Is AI inherently anti-net zero?
The data suggests that at this exponential growth rate, yes, it is.
So even if we ignore policy and climate commitments, we still hit a hard physical ceiling, the supply chain choke point. You just can't run an AI revolution if you can't get the chips and the memory to fill those million-square-foot buildings.
And we are hitting critical material limitations right now that impose a physical speed limit on the pace of this expansion. It all comes down to the specialized AI chips, which require this extremely advanced packaging technology known as CoWoS.
Chip on wafer on substrate.
Right. And it's essential for integrating the high bandwidth memory that modern AI processing needs.
And who makes this stuff?
TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor giant, is the primary manufacturer, and their CoWoS capacity is fully booked through the end of 2025.
Fully booked.
Fully booked. This means even if a tech company has the money, the land, and the permits, if they can't get that CoWoS capacity, they can't get the specialized chips they need, it is a severe, hard bottleneck.
If the chips can't be made, the data centers can't be filled, which slows the entire pace of the revolution. What about the memory itself, the DRAM that these models need?
The memory market is experiencing just extreme volatility and scarcity because of this unprecedented AI demand. DRAM supplier inventories fell dramatically from 13 to 17 weeks in late 2024 to just 2 to 4 weeks by October 2025.
That's basically no buffer at all.
No buffer.
Yeah.
And that level of scarcity immediately impacts the price.
How significant was that price impact?
It was startling. Samsung, a major supplier, was forced to raise prices for some of their server memory modules by 30 to 60% in just 2 months. Certain specialized server modules jumped from $149 to $239.
So the cost of running AI is going up rapidly, not just because of energy and compliance, but because the basic materials are getting scarcer and more expensive.
Exactly. And finally, there's the geopolitical dimension, which is always a risk for any advanced technology.
The rare earth elements.
A major vulnerability. China controls approximately 90% of the rare earth elements used in these high-tech applications. And recent export controls that Beijing imposed led to gallium prices outside China doubling within 5 months.
And gallium is critical for.
It's essential for components like advanced LEDs and semiconductors.
So a small geopolitical move can immediately double the cost of a key element, sending shockwaves through the global economy.
It flags a massive vulnerability. Furthermore, the International Energy Agency is now warning of a potential copper shortage. They're projecting that current and planned mining projects will only meet 80% of global copper needs by 2030.
And copper is in everything.
Everything, from high-voltage transmission lines to the wiring inside the servers themselves. These material constraints are imposing a physical speed limit on the pace of AI expansion that even billions of dollars can't instantly overcome.
Okay. We've covered 4 massive escalating constraints. The energy crisis, the water crisis, the political revolt, and the supply chain friction. So let's bring it all back to the core mission of this deep dive. For the listener focused on navigating the AI employment revolution, will these constraints actually stop AI?
The answer is complex, but I think the data allows for a clear synthesis. These constraints will not stop AI. They won't halt the development of new models or the relentless automation of tasks. But they will slow, shift, and significantly increase the cost of deployment. It's going to make the revolution unevenly distributed, rather than that smooth, ubiquitous wave that's often predicted in the media.
So that timeline we've established, that 2027 to 2030 window for peak disruption, you're saying it might not be delayed uniformly across the board, but it might get localized and focused by these friction points.
Precisely. The pressure points will be localized and magnified. In fact, job disruption might happen even faster in some of these high-constraint areas because of sudden economic shockwaves, like those severe utility bill spikes.
Right. If the cost of power goes up 25% for every business in a region, that's a local recessionary pressure that could accelerate displacement.
Exactly. And conversely, the areas that are aggressively courting data centers with cheap land and lax regulation, parts of Texas, Nevada, certain rural states, they'll see the infrastructure boom continue rapidly. But that leads to highly localized grid and water stress, and potentially faster job displacement there as well.
So the pace of change will be dictated by local resource availability.
It will.
So for someone listening, trying to create their own surviving AI plan, what's the most actionable takeaway from all this friction? Where should they be focusing their attention?
My advice is this. If you are planning your career disruption strategy, don't just watch OpenAI's announcement calendar. Don't just follow the latest algorithm update. Watch your local utility bill increases. Track your local zoning commission meetings. Pay attention to community resistance movements, these friction points. These are the real-world metrics that dictate the pace and focus of the tech industry, not just the technical breakthroughs.
So knowing where the bottlenecks are tells you where the regulatory risk is highest, where financial costs are going to be transferred to consumers, and where the political resistance is strongest.
It does. It shifts the focus from purely technical adaptation to geopolitical and environmental awareness. The binary choice we established, you're either adapting or becoming obsolete, that still holds. But the timeline is being negotiated not in Silicon Valley boardrooms, but in city council meetings and on your electricity bill.
The constraints, energy, water, political will, materials, they're raising the barrier to entry and increasing the cost of running this new AI world. And that cost pressure will ultimately determine which models succeed, which businesses deploy AI widely, and how quickly your specific job is impacted.
That's the bottom line.
Okay, so let's unpack this one last time. The data really suggests that the true defining bottleneck for the AI revolution, it may not be developing the next algorithm. It might be building the next million-square-foot warehouse and finding 5 million gallons of water a day to run it.
The physical world is pushing back.
And that pushback has a price tag.
And that leads to a profound question that hangs over this entire AI project and over our survival. If AI's existence puts this immense strain on the electric grid and water supply, if it forces major global companies to abandon their net zero goals, and it triggers widespread citizen revolts, making the facilities that power it less popular than nuclear plants, we have to ask ourselves,
What's the question?
are we prepared for a future where technological progress is defined not by how smart the innovation is, but by the sheer volume of physical resources it consumes? We are in a binary choice, adapt or become obsolete. But the planet itself might be choosing for us by imposing a physical limit on the speed of technological change.
A sobering thought, but one that is absolutely necessary as we map out our future. Thank you for joining us for the Season Break special deep dives into the infrastructure that powers the AI revolution.
And we will be back soon to start Season 2, The Protection Playbook. We're going to dive deep into strategies for building immunity to automation. And we're starting with Episode 7, Healthcare and Public Safety, the Untouchables.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
We'll analyze why those sectors have historically resisted large-scale automation and ask if that protection is permanent.
Don't miss it. Until then, keep analyzing the real-world metrics, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time on Surviving AI.